We continue our countdown to our most anticipated tactical to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Battle for Berlin with another interview. We are joined by Signals Lieutenant Taras at a forward observation post in Berlin. They have attended the Military History Preservation Group's Stalingrad Factory event for 3 years, fighting many battles in between, and are currently involved with another massive living history project. Tell us about yourself, Taras. When did you start reenacting? What inspired you?
Absolutely. For those who may not know me, you may have seen me on Facebook as Andryusha Taras. My name's Lindsay Tripp, and I've been reenacting really since I was 9 or 10 years old, particularly with American Civil War. My father was a pilot, so I always had an inspiration in airplanes, particularly with World War I and World War II aircraft. And, well, as soon as I saw what living history, what reenacting was, I was hooked. That really carried through until I was 18 years old, when I purchased my first Mosin Nagant. I sold one Civil War frock coat and purchased my entire Red Army kit, and that was coming up on 9 years ago now. It was incredibly understudied, if not just not mentioned in my high school education. I remember when I was in high school, particularly fascinated with World War II again, the textbook only had a paragraph explaining the Eastern Front, and there was 27 million lives on the low end lost within that very short 4-year conflict, the Great Patriotic War. During this time, the Soviet Union was a vital ally of the United States, and without 65 to 75% of the German military, held up with the Soviet Red military, with the Red Army, things like the Normandy invasion and the North Africa campaign, the invasion in Italy, would have been significantly more difficult for my grandfathers in particular. I have 2 relatives who served in World War II, not in the Red Army, but I thought that different perspective was very much needed in the modern times. Now that we have some distance from the Soviet Union, now is the time for historians like myself to investigate more. So I am the co-founder and currently the treasurer of the OSOAVIAKhIM Foundation. There are 5 of us within our presidium, our kind of central cadre, which help keep things running, particularly our Discord channel. And we also have access to event insurance through the World War II Historical Reenactment Society, which gives us the opportunity to have this sort of opportunity for the 80th anniversary, for the death of the Reich at Cresson this upcoming May. Yeah, at the time I was a very young novice reenactor, particularly for Eastern Front, for World War II. Living, where I was geographically, there wasn't a lot of other units, and these units are around, but they were always a 6, 7, or 8-hour drive away from me. So when I heard about the Stalingrad Factory event, not only was it a very unique opportunity to be engaged in something like this, to have an event in an urban environment, but it was also a good chance to network and meet other people who had similar interests as myself with the Red Army. And a lot of those relationships really did come out to pan through, particularly with the OSOAVIAKhIM Foundation. A lot of the people who are within this foundation are not just reenactors, we're not just living historians to each other, but we were also dear friends amongst each other. And that would not have been possible without the Stalingrad event. I had no rank, and that was one of the things about not really being associated with the unit, was I didn't know who to really fall in with. But thankfully, how the event was organized, that wasn't really a problem. Anyone could fall in, could sign up, register, and they would get placed within some kind of squad. So I was under the command of Lieutenant Andrew Ball, Uh, and I had a phenomenal time. We were defending the headquarters area for many, many extended hours into the night. I remember very vividly being on a Maxim machine gun position and begging for reinforcements, which never came for quite a few hours. But that was all part of the experience, and everyone left the event really noting how special that was for us as reenactors, as living historians. For myself, it was my first taste of urban combat, meaning that we had a relatively open factory to engage in. There was not a lot of closed spaces or tight hallways, so that wasn't particularly an issue. There were stairwells and so forth. The building itself, was starting to fall apart, so we did have to be cautious. But the Stalingrad event really lasted, within my memory, for those urban engagements, particularly towards the end of the event. Our platoon was the last platoon, the last little stronghold rather, of Soviet resistance within the building. So I got to experience the full brunt force of the German military, if you will, come down onto me and to my comrades. So that was particularly exciting, and it will live with me for as long as I continue to reenact, for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, the Cresson facility, which we are hosting the 80th Berlin event at, is one of those unique sites in that there are many, many buildings that we have access to, and some of these buildings are multi-tiered. There may be some rubble in the street and so forth. But as reenactors, we're not unfamiliar with these sort of challenges. I myself and many others who are attending this event have attended the Newville site, which is maintained by the Great War Association, World War I reenactors, and thankful to a mutually beneficial, arrangement between us as Soviet reenactors and the GWA site, we've been able to hold many tacticals within the trenches there. And we can draw upon the lessons of Stalingrad as well. So if you go to the event Facebook page, one of the first things that you can find is a safety guidelines sheet. And we are taking a lot of effort to be clear and concise with what is expected from reenactors. So things like no blind firing around corners, things like minding your muzzles and what's around it. We really call on reenactors to, reflect on the years of experiences that they have in the hobby and to, be smart in this tactical environment. Most of the fighting within Berlin is going to be focused on the streets, which will provide ample sorts of more open combat. And the main drive, the main effort, if you will, for the event will be, if you will, to encircle forces, to encircle Germans within entire buildings and give those defenders a choice of surrendering or trying to evacuate to the next line of retreat, next line of defense. So this will put a good emphasis on your unit commanders to make quick decisions and to stick to the orders that they are given by high command. Absolutely. One of the things that we are using at Berlin Death of the Reich is a fully functioning communication system, meaning that for the Red Army, there are going to be radios and telephone lines connecting the headquarters to various forward observation posts or maybe newly conquered buildings, and that is going to give unit commanders sort of a centralized network to stay in touch with each other and to better coordinate either an offense for the Red Army or a defense for the German defenders. So we will be bringing a couple kilometers, nearly half a mile, if not a mile, of telephone wire, and we have access to several period radios, which will help kind of keep the flow of things going, making sure that the event kind of has a lively aspect to it, but also to make sure that things are done safely, and that if there is any problems, it'll only be a matter of seconds before people in headquarters know, and that something can be done about it. Yes, so I have two roles. Within the Soviet registration team, I am helping people, just get aware of the event. I'm sure you may have seen some of my posts on Facebook, just letting you know that registration is open and so forth. I am also helping to kind of coordinate one of the security teams. So we call these security teams jokingly gatekeepers, because the entire facility is, well, enclosed, and there are gates coming into the site. So if you are a German reenactor, you'll be met with field German police, and if you are a Soviet reenactor, you'll be met by NKVD border guards, who are going to help get you through the registration gate, make sure that you have all the documents and papers that you need for the event. We all get little cards to make sure that you've paid and so forth. And then those troops will also escort you to your headquarters, to the front lines. In a headquarters aspect, I will be doing, well, exactly what you see me here. I will be operating, well, a team of people helping to keep the communications of the event running smoothly. I'll be in touch directly with German command to make sure that any ceasefires that need to be enforced happen, and that all the urban combat is happening in a safe and proficient manner. And myself and my communications team, we're very excited to contribute to this much larger effort, and we're excited to see this event pull through. Yes, so our event commanders are constantly messaging me to make sure that people are actually getting registered. Again, I'm trying to encourage people to register as early as possible. The more people we know are confirmed to the event, the more, well, security we have, of course, in our own hearts and minds. But that gives us to more funds to, well, play with the site a little bit more. So part of our efforts will also be going to the Cresson Sanatorium a couple of weeks before the event itself, in order to make sure the areas are safe, make sure that any rubble is cleaned up, make sure that the streets are clear enough and kind of have a good flow to them. It makes sense when you're in that urban combat where you're supposed to go. Part of that will also be labeling buildings to kind of make sure that the Germans and the Soviets know where to come in, where to come out of. Again, we want to make sure that this is safe and organized and not a total cluster. Yeah, so by the time of Berlin, really by 1943, a lot of these NKVD, those are People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs troops. These NKVD troops are being integrated within the Red Army specifically to pull rear security. So these are men who are rounding up potential deserters, potential insurrectionists, or German collaborators in the rear of the Red Army. Part of their responsibilities would have included the processing of prisoners as well. So this is one element which we are looking to kind of, again, make this event unique, in that if you are a German soldier here at our Berlin event, if you show up as Wehr or Volkssturm, what have you, when you ultimately surrender, you are going to be processed by not only Red Army troops, but NKVD troops, searching your paperwork, searching you for weapons, and then carrying you off into the rear. So this is just one added element of, historical authenticity within this event. For the Germans, we have the luxury of being able to portray their SS, civil services, all of these different branches that were partaking in the defense of Berlin. And for the Soviets, for the Red Army, we wanted to include just a small node to some of the troops who did participate in the battle. And those were troops that were formerly NKVD border guards in 1941 and 42. And then by the time of 44 and the Berlin offensive, these men were integrated into the 3rd Shock Army, pulling security for units like the 150th Rifle Division, which we will be portraying at Berlin. So these troops are going to be probably the first thing that you see. I mentioned earlier that there is quite literally a gate around the entire facility, and when you come out of the parking lot to register, these are going to be the first troops that you see. They're going to help you through the registration process, make sure that you paid and all of that. They're going to hand you the documents, that you're going to carry throughout the event to make sure that you actually paid. These will be checked at morning formations, as I'm sure many of us are familiar with at events. And the site is also rather large. So particularly for the Soviets, we did need some kind of specific group of men to kind of ferry troops from the registration site across to the Soviet staging area. And for the Germans, the field police are going to be doing very much the same thing. Importantly, these registration teams, whether they're NKVD or German field police, you should think of them as kind of speaking for us. We give them a sort of how to, a sort of guideline as to how to get you, the participant, to headquarters. And while we are off, ensuring that field phones are set up and the frontline positions are, where there should be, those security teams are going to be helping us as organizers just make the whole thing much smoother. And we appreciate their help, absolutely. So in a historical sense, a lot of what the Red Army is trying to do is what's called a combined arms approach. This means using potentially the Air Force, tankers, mechanized troops, as well as artillery and infantry to kind of have a pattern to the assault. So maybe the airborne will go in at a certain time, and then you'll have an artillery barrage. You'll have a gap in that artillery barrage at a set time where the infantry can move forward. So all of this communication across branches could not have been done without dedicated signals troops who were integrated into every rifle regiment, every rifle battalion, corps, division, so on, within the Red Army. Great question. I come from American Civil War reenacting, and one of the first things that really fascinated myself with communications was a lot of the technology, a lot of the phones that you see behind me and the wires is really late 1870s, 1880s, and 90s technology. And particularly with the Red Army, you see a lot of telegrams being used. So it was kind of a fascination of, I've seen this before, and I wonder how that sort of developed. Of course, if you're familiar with the American Civil War, telegram played a massive impact in not only military communications, but how the war was reported back at home in newspapers as well. So for the Red Army, historically, it's something that's very vital to their success in 1945, their victory over Germany. And for us as reenactors, this is something which gives us another element to play with, if you will. It's another tool in our immersion that we can go out and use this technology in a sort of context which it was used before. We can get frustrated with the radios just like they did, and we can get tangled in communications wire just like they did. So for us as living historians, that's one extra element. And it also, again, it serves to keep us safe. If anything should happen at an event, whether it's a twisted ankle or a powder burn, God forbid something happens, this communication equipment works, and we can get emergency services to the event site much, much rapidly than we could if we did not implement this sort of technology. Absolutely. So on the field, it is going to be very important that the unit commanders are, well, keeping us in touch. The event coordinators, major, captain, myself, we need to know where you are, what kind of resistance you are facing, but also other logistical things like how much water have you gone through, how much ammunition have you gone through, are you suffering any heat casualties or any wounds per se, in the reenactment settings or context. So this sort of communications equipment can let us know if your unit needs some kind of break, some kind of relief. And at Berlin, we're going to have our headquarters, but the headquarters will branch off into the field a little bit using these forward observation posts. And if you're a reenactor and you need some ammunition or you need water, the forward observation post would be the place to go to get that quick relief and get you back to the front. So this is not just us playing with old wires and old tools, but this is a vital service to the people who are out on the front lines and the people who come out and make this event the event that we hope it can be. By far, telephones and hardline communications are what's being used. Before the war, the Soviets do have radios, but the radio industry is, well, to put it lightly, it does not compare to the American radio industry. There's also a sort of hesitancy, there's a resistance to use radios. Many commanders believe that they can be intercepted much easily, versus hardline communications, which is more tried and tested, particularly throughout World War I. So part of it is just a sort of supply issue. The Soviet economy does not have enough radios to go around, and part of it is more of a, if you will, a belief that the phones and the telegrams are just much, much more reliable. And if they use the phones, if they use the telegrams, it's ensured success. Berlin is, on one note, this is an 80th anniversary event. So 2025 here is a very unique year to host a event like Berlin, in that it's 80 years since the actual events have happened. And this is, I think, a particularly unique time for us as living historians, as reenactors. Our generation is the last generation to go out and speak with these people who experienced World War II, whether they were soldiers or not, who fought through some of these very famous battles, such as the Battle of Berlin, and to get their perspective on their contributions, on maybe if they have any advice, since they have seen a world change tremendously over the course of 80 years. So for us as historians, this is a very unique opportunity for us to get together in a environment which is very unique to have a reenactment in, somewhat of an urban setting with something like 80 buildings. Some of them are multi-level. There are tunnels, there are streets. This will be a very, very immersive opportunity to experience for yourself some of that chaos within Berlin. And as a for myself as a coordinator and speaking for the rest of the coordination team, we hope this is a very incredible experience should you decide to come out.